Joining us today. Hello, everyone. We're glad to have you. We think it is 5 o'clock and we can get started. My name is Amanda Gillen. I'm the Director of Learning at the Frick Pittsburgh. Welcome to another online live, as you can see, Frick program that we are doing at a slightly different time today. We've been doing our programs a little bit later in the evening, and we thought we'd try something a little bit different. We're going to do our best to keep this to half an hour, be done by 5:30. We thought this would be a little end of the day treat for you, or a program to watch while you're making dinner before you start dinner. So we're really glad to have all of you with us. The title of our program is My Darling Boy, Letters from Mrs. Frick to Child. And we thought this would be, it's a topic that we love. These letters have been invaluable to us in our interpretation of Clayton, and on the heels of Mother's Day, we thought that this would be a sort of fun time to take a look at Mrs. Frick and her relationship with her son. Before I introduce our presenters, I wanted to do a quick little tutorial on using Zoom. Hopefully we're all getting good at this, but here's a little screen that Dawn put together for us. Just a couple of features. All of the panelists are going to stay on the screen, so you should be able to see all of us along with the images that we want to share. You do have a couple of options for what you see. In the upper right corner, if you look at that yellow arrow, you can use that to toggle between gallery view and speaker view, which will give you two sort of looks. For all of the participants, we have muted your video and your audio, so you don't have, we won't see you or hear you. You can hear us and see us. But if you want to ask questions, we want to certainly answer your questions, and you can do that using the chat function. So if you can see it here in the center. If you hover your cursor along the bottom of your screen, you should get that toolbar that would pop up, and you can click on that chat button and it'll pull up a window on the side where you can type questions to any of the panelists, and we will look at those and answer those toward the end. Also, if you have questions about your use of Zoom, our education coordinator, Kelly McMasters, is standing by to be our tech guru, and you can type a question in there if you're having trouble, and Kelly can help you with that as well. So thank you, Kelly, for helping on that end. We do it without the tech support for sure. So before I introduce our panelists, I wanted to actually introduce Elizabeth Barker, who is the Executive Director of the Frick Pittsburgh, to say a few words. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. I wanted to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to be able to connect with you even while our campus is closed. And I also wanted to give a special thank you to the colleagues and panelists who brought such wonderful original thinking and research into a program that I know will be really special. I hope you enjoy it as much as I'm planning to.
Thank you very, very much. We're really, really excited to do this. And I am so happy to now introduce two of really my very favorite people that I have the privilege of working with over many years, actually. On the screen, you are seeing Dawn Reid Brean, who is the Frick's Associate Curator of Decorative Arts. Dawn is also the person who takes care of the collection at Clayton, and she is responsible for all of the really wonderful tours and installations that we've had over the past few years. So happy to have her with us. And our other very special guest, who I will rave about, is Julie Ludwig. Julie is the Associate Archivist from the Frick Art Reference Library in New York. Julie has been at the archives for 18 years, I think you said, and I've been working with her for 13 of the 18. So we have a long relationship, and she and the other staff at the Frick Art Reference Library have been amazing at helping us to discover archival materials and research that lets us really grow our interpretation. So I want to thank Julie for being here, and thank her colleague, Sally Brazil, who is Chief of Archives and Records Management, and also Susan Shore, who is another archivist at the library. They have been amazingly helpful to us, and we are so happy to partner with you for this program and hope that it's the first of many that we can do virtually, which makes it easier, I guess, for us to bring Julie to the Frick. So Julie is actually going to start by giving us some background on the Frick Art Reference Library and the Family Archives and the Child's Frick papers in particular. So welcome, Julie. We're so glad to have you.
It's great to be here, Amanda. So this is the landing page for the archives portion of the website at the Frick Art Reference Library. And over on the left side, you'll see where you can search finding aids and browse. You can access digitized material. You can see highlights and request access to the archives. And there's also a link at the bottom there, at the bottom left, to our transcription project, which we have to transcribe scanned archival material for greater discoverability and access. So Dawn, if you would advance to the next slide. This is just sort of a general slide about the Frick family papers. There are circa 1,500 linear feet. So if you can imagine a shelf 1,500 linear feet long, that's about the physical space that it occupies. The collection contains correspondence, receipts, vouchers, subject files, ledgers, diaries, photographs, scrapbooks, clippings, printed material, motion pictures, and on and on. It basically consists of all of the manuscript material that was in Helen Clay Frick's possession at the time she died in 1984. In addition to all of these formats, it also includes some objects, such as one of Mr. Frick's cigars or various locks of hair from the Frick family children. It really kind of, it runs the gamut, and it's full of surprises. It focuses on the immediate family, so Henry Clay Frick, his wife Adelaide Howard Childs Frick, their daughter Helen Clay Frick, and their son Childs Frick, and it also documents extensively the residences of the Frick family, including Clayton and 1 East 70th Street in New York, and the Frick family's country home in Pride's Crossing, Massachusetts, Eagle Rock. And specifically, the materials that we're talking today come from the Childs Frick papers within the Frick family papers. It's all kind of like, it's very hierarchical. And the Childs Frick papers have about 40 folders of correspondence from Adelaide to her son over the period of about 1893 to 1896. She wrote to him about every 3 days, and Amanda will explain more of the context a little bit later. But she wrote from all over, largely from Pittsburgh, but if the family happened to be traveling, she would write wherever she was. If she was in Palm Beach, Florida, or Washington, D.C., or New York, she made sure that her son got a letter while he was away at school. It's interesting that there's nothing from Childs Frick to his mother during this period, which could be explained by a number of scenarios. Either he didn't write as frequently, or she didn't keep the letters as religiously as he did, or perhaps they just didn't survive with this collection for whatever reason. There are a small number of letters from him among his sister's papers, and there are some more within additional family papers that we received outside of this collection. But the disparity is striking between letters to Child and letters from Childs. But what I do want to point out is that it's remarkable not only that she wrote this body of letters to her son over the course of about 3 years, but that he not only kept them, and he brought them back from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Pittsburgh. And if you think he was ranging in age from about 10 to 13 at this time, for a 10 to 13-year-old boy to have kept these letters so carefully and made sure that they made it home is really kind of striking and remarkable. So I will pass it off to Amanda now to give us some background about what these letters are all about.
Thank you, Julie, so much. Yeah, I guess the sort of starting question here is, why were these letters written at all? And if any of you have heard me talk about these letters in the past, we use these a lot in our interpretation, in our tours. And, they are, in my opinion, some of the best things to have ever kind of happened in the Frick past, because they reveal all of these day-to-day details. But they were written because little Childs Frick goes off to boarding school, essentially leaves Pittsburgh and leaves his family. In 1892, Henry Clay Frick goes on a search for a private tutor, essentially to, tutor his son Childs. He reaches out to some friends and gets some recommendations, and a gentleman named Clyde Dunaway, in fact, on the screen, yeah, there we go. Here's Childs on the left in a photo taken in Cambridge with his football. This is one of our favorites. And then on the right, you see Clyde Dunaway, who's quite handsome, we don't think, at least I think. But Frick hires him in 1892. He comes to Pittsburgh, interviews with the family, and signs on as Childs Frick's private tutor in Pittsburgh in 1892. He actually works with Childs Frick from 1892 until 1896, but only that first year takes place in Pittsburgh. Because in 1893, Clyde Dunaway is accepted to Harvard University. He becomes a master's student and working on his master's degree, and then eventually his doctorate. So he is leaving Pittsburgh to go to attend classes at Harvard, to go to Boston, and the decision is made that Childs Frick is going to go with him. Dunaway seems to have formed a close relationship with the Fricks. They did this. There were certain people who worked with them and for them who became very close to the family. Helen Frick's governess, Marika Oji, is another one of these people who really works with the family for a number of years and then stays close with them for years afterward. So clearly in that year of 1892, this bond of trust and something develops where the Fricks are willing to send their son Childs away. So Childs leaves Pittsburgh. We should say that it seems from evidence in other letters that Mrs. Frick did not love this idea. She was not a fan of her little boy, who at this point is 10 years old, leaving Pittsburgh and leaving her care and going away. But Childs attends boarding school. Clyde Dunaway is taking his own classes and is also overseeing Childs' education and care up in Massachusetts. Just by way of a little bit of extra context, Clyde Dunaway, as I said, stays close with the Frick family. He goes on to teach history at Harvard and Stanford universities, and he becomes the president of several colleges and universities in his career. So he goes on to have a very illustrious career. You can see why the Fricks wanted him to be an influence on their son. Childs Frick was sometimes perhaps more interested in being outside and his natural world pursuits than in his studies. There seems to be some reluctance on his part to knuckle down with the books, and I think the Fricks probably felt that Dunaway was a very good influence on Childs for that reason. But the other thing just to say is that in 1892, when Henry Clay Frick hires Dunaway to be Childs' tutor, that is the year that he is embroiled in the Homestead lockout and strike situation. He has an assassination attempt on his life. I mean, there is a lot of family trauma. And just in terms of Mrs. Frick, at this point in 1893, she is a woman who has actually lost 2 of her children. The family lost their daughter Martha in 1891 when she was just about 6 years old. And then in August of 1892, they lose their newborn son, Henry Clay Frick Jr. So these letters that we're going to talk about were written by Mrs. Frick, who is a mother who has lost children, who misses her child, and who is really trying to keep him connected to home. And I think that's what comes through, as we were saying, in the details of these letters. So with that, Julie has helped us immeasurably to get our hands on these letters and to use them. She has also done some sleuthing and research to ferret out really wonderful information and details that are revealed in these letters and other documents. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about that.
This was really fun, I have to admit. So the archives are exhaustive in the degree of documentation that they contain. Just tens upon tens of thousands of receipts and 95 boxes of correspondence, plus 42 boxes of outgoing letterpress books. I mean, it just goes on. And you can find very small details about a lot of things, but it was striking to us that we only ever heard references to Childs Frick attended boarding school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that was that. We've never found a tuition bill. We never found any correspondence with a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We never found a grade report. And this was really striking because we really, really wanted to know, where did he attend school? The arrangement also seemed a bit odd because Childs was supposedly attending boarding school, but he was living off campus with his tutor. So we were struck by that arrangement as well. So really there was nothing to go on until we happened to find a reference in a letter from Dunaway to a Mr. Brown building his school in Cambridge. And it rang a bell with me, and I thought, well, why would he have mentioned Mr. Brown in his school unless Childs had some kind of association with it? So I started noodling around and found a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's now the Buckingham Brown and Nichols School, but at the time it was just the Brown and Nichols School. And the time period was right, so I wrote to them, and it took several months. I think my email maybe bounced around to a few different offices, and nothing really came out right away. But several months later, I got a letter back from the archivist there, and he apologized that the letters from that time period in the 1890s are really slim, and he didn't really have much to offer. But then magically, a few days later, a box appeared on his desk containing school brochures from the early 1890s. And he was delighted to scan and send us, if Dawn would advance to the next slide, some examples of these catalogs, which in fact verify the fact that Childs Frick was a student there in this example from 1894. So the whole thing turned out very happily. They were very pleased to share the information with us, and we were overjoyed to have it because we finally had a name of a school to associate with. With that, I will turn it back over to Dawn for some information about what these letters document.
So hi, everybody. I love these letters, exactly as Amanda said, because they share so many details of the day-to-day life at Clayton. And I have to thank Julie. I'm so glad she's here to kind of give the larger context for the archives. I have to thank her for her assistance in making all of this material so accessible to us. And I've had the privilege of spending several days, usually 2 or 3 days in a row, just sitting in the reading room at the Frick Art Reference Library and paging through these letters. And they're kind of incredibly mundane on their surface. They're filled with these very innocuous little details of everyday life, but that's really what makes them so incredibly valuable and intriguing to us, because it draws out the activities and what's happening in the house, what the family is doing. So to highlight just a couple of themes that come out, one thing in particular that's always very clear is her absolute love for her child. I think she's very clearly missing Childs, but she also is wanting to stay connected to him and kind of keep him strong as well. So you get this kind of fortitude that comes through in her letters that I always really appreciate. And she's just kind of mentioning the happenings in the household. You hear, that Papa, Mr. Frick, is traveling back and forth to New York and Washington, D.C. She's updating him about what his Aunt Addie is up to, what games Helen is playing, and what parties she's been attending lately. And then also these kind of giant historical figures make quite a few appearances, including Mr. Carnegie, whose name is mentioned in several letters. So in that sense, these letters help kind of draw out this very intimate relationship between what we think of as these gigantic historical figures, that they're really two men, like two business colleagues having dinner together. She mentions Mr. and Mrs. Carnegie staying with the Frick family for several days, and she's updating Childs and telling him about that. She talks to him about the weather, telling him how cold it's been or how nice and bright it's been, all of her activities, if she's gone out riding. The family pets make quite a few appearances in her letters, and I always love this. So showing here an image of the sitting room at Clayton. This is Mrs. Frick's desk, where she's likely writing many of these letters to Childs, filling them with all the activities at Clayton. But as I mentioned, the family pets get a lot of ink in her letters to Childs, including the horses. She's updating them on her rides, but most of all, Brownie. I think he's one of my favorite figures in the Frick household during this particular period. He makes a lot of appearances. She's talking about how he hasn't done anything naughty for quite some time, so you get the sense that he was not always a very well-behaved dog, and that maybe he's missing Childs as well. She's also often referencing, holiday preparations and just general travels and what the family is doing. And our understanding, we use these letters a lot, as Amanda said, in our interpretation of the house. And we're often going to this archival information when we're planning our installations at Clayton. And one example in particular is for a couple of summers ago, we were working on a tour called Duty and Devotion, which explored the women of Clayton, kind of looking at the house through the eyes of the women who lived and worked there. And it allowed us to kind of turn a spotlight on Adelaide, Helen, and Addie, and all of their fellow ladies of the house. And so when we were thinking about how we might decorate the tablescape in the dining room, I immediately thought about this passage in one letter that referenced Adelaide giving a luncheon on Thursday in honor of Addie, and Papa gives a dinner this week for Mr. Carnegie. So we knew that we had to do an installation that kind of evoked that letter and would allow us to kind of talk about the gendered aspects of entertaining. So we chose a very kind of feminine and floral plate for the dining room table. This is perfectly appropriate for a luncheon, but would never have graced the table during a dinner between Frick and Carnegie. So we could kind of pull out those ideas of gender roles in the Gilded Age. And then we chose to go with lots of pieces and lots of little lace doilies and napkins and goblets and plates and silverware because of a follow-up letter that she wrote to Childs when she says, the luncheon was beautiful, but I don't want to do them very often. Too many things to be gotten out and put away. And I think anyone who's ever thrown a dinner party can probably relate to Adelaide's words in that particular letter. Her letters also really help us. We often think we know a lot about an object, but her letters can help kind of just flesh out and round out what we know about a particular object. So these are a couple of pieces from a set of glassware in the dining room at Clayton, which might be familiar to many of you. And for years, this had always been described as bohemian, but I thought it looked really Venetian and kind of Renaissance in character. And with Julie's help, kind of talking about how the archive is so useful to us, we actually uncovered a receipt in the archives in Mr. Frick's papers from a retailer in Venice called Testolini. So we were able to tie the glassware set to this particular maker. And these archives are so helpful because they tell us, what the Fricks are buying and who they're buying from. And incidentally, we also had wonderful family photos from the vacation that they took in Europe. So you're seeing the Frick family along with their friends that they're traveling with in Venice in this picture. And Clyde Dunaway is on the right boat there. He's the young man in profile with the dark beard, and then you can see Childs sitting next to him as well. So we kind of thought we knew a lot about this particular set based on these documents. And then reading through the letters in the archives, I found this wonderful passage that referenced unpacking all of the goods that they had bought in Venice. So it kind of just helped tie this story together and just add a lot more detail than we ever could have had before. So I don't know if Amanda has anything else to share about her favorite letters from the archives.
Just thinking about it, and I also have had the privilege, and it really has been a privilege of going to the archives over the years and spending a day or 2 days, with Julie, with Sally, with the staff there, and with these papers. And there is nothing like seeing these things in person. And because we spend our work, part of our work is to interpret people's lives, and we take that seriously. And there's a lot of work that goes into doing it correctly. And this goes for all of our our interpretive staff as well, who I know some are watching us now. We work hard to get it right, and it's hard to get it right when you're trying to think about people's lives. And that's why coming across letters like this, or using these letters, and hearing Julie talk about how many files there are, makes me think how we have just scratched the surface. But this is such a wealth for us. We're trying to imagine, and recreate life in Clayton and make it come to life for all of you, for all of our visitors. It is a museum now, but it wasn't always. There were lives lived in those rooms, and so these letters just give us the kind of detail that we would not have known. We would not have known about Brownie biting somebody, or tearing Mr. Frick's pants, or about Helen playing with her paper dolls in the library sitting room, or the luncheons and the dinners, and just all of the little things that Mrs. Frick wrote to her child. I mean, it's just lovely, lovely stuff. I guess the other thing I'm thinking about is how the tone is so similar to what any of us would say to any child today, any of our kids. She's addressing the same kind of, are you well? Are you keeping warm? Are you doing your homework? Or, are you eating? Or just all of the things that a mom says that make her and him and the whole family, I think, kind of come to life. That is really special. That's what I think. That's what we all think. I think this is where we wanted to read a couple of the letters in their entirety. This letter that you're seeing in front of you, Dawn's actually going to read. And I have one from November 19th of 1893. And as Dawn said, she wrote these letters every other day, every couple of days. One thing that I really love is that you can see her handwriting. We haven't talked about her handwriting yet, but I'm sure all of you are thinking how difficult her handwriting is to decipher. You do a bunch of these in a row, you kind of learn to blur your eyes and figure out how she makes her letters. Her E's look like W's, and there's just a lot of crazy things she does. But there are a couple of letters in the archives that I've seen where she writes to Childs, and she's basically says, I know you're having trouble reading my letters. Is this better? You know, so you can see him saying to her, you know, Mama, I can't read what you're sending me. So I understand that. So I transcribed this letter from Sunday night, November 19th, and I want to read that to you now, and then Dawn has one as well. My darling boy, I should like very much to clasp you in my arms this minute and give and take no end of kisses. It seems such a long time since I saw my Ty. That was a nickname for him. And 2 weeks and more to wait. Papa did not come home, but we expect him in the morning. He called me up Friday and today, but both times I was out and Helen did the talking. She wrote Mr. Dunaway a French letter yesterday, and I addressed it to Mr. Mati, which is a nickname for him, not thinking at the time it might not reach him by that name. Yesterday and today have been rather disagreeable, cloudy, cold, and windy. George says he saw Mr. and Mrs. Knox out horseback riding this morning, but I am very sure they could not have enjoyed the ride on a day like this. I have been quite busy all week and really forgot all about the books you wanted me to send, but I will try to send them this week. Tomorrow I have to go to town, which will take more than half the day, and we have our whist class in the afternoon. This is our last week of whist, and we all feel that we have learned very little. Sweet little Helen is talking about Kris Kringle and wants me to write to him tomorrow, telling him what she wants him to bring her children, her dolls. The poor little things are still sick, every one of them. Don't you think that terrible? Spencer was very much pleased. I have to interrupt and say, before I started this letter, I meant to give a little bit of context. This whole next section is about domestic servants, some of the staff who worked for the Frick. So it's very interesting when you see what she's writing. Spencer was very much pleased with the letter you wrote him, and he will send you a cake this week. George Burr has been sick at home for some days last, and I think you had better write to him. Also, write Richard sometime. I know he should like so much to hear from you too. I wish Mr. Dunaway, would bring you to the telephone office to talk to us, and if he would set the day and hour so that we would be home when called. I want to hear your own sweet little voice after all these long weeks. And Papa, Helen, and Addie want to talk to our little man too. George McGrew was to have helped Brownie with a letter to you today, but he has a very bad cold and has been miserable all day. Good night, my darling. Love, hugs, and kisses without end from Helen and your dear mama. P.S. You had better call us up on the telephone Wednesday evening at 7:30 or Thursday about 4 o'clock. Tell Mr. D to please let me know which it shall be. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are our class days, and I do not get home until 7. Every tone of every mother, right, is in that letter somewhere in one way or another. I picked this letter to read. Dawn and I particularly love it because of what it reveals about the relationship with the domestic staff. She is clearly, child is communicating back and forth with some of the servants. Spencer Ford is their longtime chef who is sending him a cake. Child is writing to him. Telling her son, you know, write to these people who care about you. And I think that that is a really interesting and kind of revealing thing. So Dawn has another letter, November 23rd, I think, the same year.
Yes, so yeah, just a few days later, we'll read a second letter that she writes. My darling boy, last evening, we all had a great time waiting for you to call us up on the telephone. We had finished dinner and did not want to leave the dining room as we would be right there at the time. We all heard your sweet little voice plainly, but you did not seem to hear us well. I guess you felt about as I did. When I heard you, I almost wept, but I knew that would never do if I was to talk with you for only a minute, and that was about all the time I could have. Mr. Dunaway's voice sounded as if he was close by us, and if it were not that I had to hurry, so I should have liked to have heard from him more about my boy. Papa went east again this afternoon, expecting to get back Sunday morning, which I hope he shall. Last evening, we all unpacked the things that came from Venice. This is our Testolini service. One piece of glass was smashed, and 2 pieces of the set had been left out. It is too bad, but George will write to Venice to have them sent, and I hope they will come before long. I hope the photos you were to have had taken today will be good, and be sure to bring them home with you. I have invited the boys to dinner Saturday evening. Friday evening, Judge and Hugh are to take some of the boys to the theater, and I suppose they will want you. I will ask Joseph and Gifford to spend Friday with you. These are 2 of Child's best friends. And the next day you will see the others. I hope the weather will be pleasant so that we can take a horseback ride. If we can't ride out, how would you like to go to the academy to ride and drill, and I would go with you? Addie wants me to play a game of whist with her. Good night, my precious little man. With no end of love and by such lots of hugs and kisses from Helen, Addie, and your own dear mama. I had to choose this letter because this is one of the letters that I was reading in the reading room and teared up a little bit. I almost teared up reading it now. It's not the first time that I've cried in the archives, probably won't be the last either. But I just think in that first paragraph, when she's talking about how happy she is to hear his voice, technology in the 1890s, being able to call her son who is away in Cambridge, the image of the Frick family sitting at the dining room table and waiting for his telephone call and then hearing that sweet little voice over the line is just so incredibly precious and heartwarming. And I don't think you need to be a mother to appreciate the sentiment in that letter, especially in this current climate. We are all missing someone or something that we love so much that we could tear up if we hear their voice. So we had to share that one this evening. These letters, I think this one tells you why these letters are so special to us.
I'm tearing up now. Professionally crying on screen. Julie, is there anything else you want to say about the archives or our use of them? I mean, we're so grateful for the relationship we have with the archives. It will continue. We're grateful for you and happy to have you with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love seeing what you do with this material. It's so exciting and so fun for us because, we live with it on a daily basis. And I don't want to say it's easy to take it for granted, but it kind of is because, you don't read every letter with a fine-tooth comb every day. And so, you grasp what it is and you can tell people about it. And, but to really get this close with the material is really special. And I think what you guys do is really remarkable in the way that you connect to it. So, just hats off to you and your team out there for what you do.
Thank you. We couldn't do it without you all either. So it's been so fun to talk about these things. We could go on and on, but we promise we won't. I want to take some questions here. Louisa was asking who is George in the letter that I read, and I apologize for probably not setting that up as well as I should have. I think she's talking, there were two Georges mentioned. George Durr is a grounds person who worked for the family. So she's talking about him. I think he is the one who she is saying, let's see, before I go back to my notes here, which are now everywhere. George Durr has been sick at home for some days, and I think you would better write to him. So I think he's one of the grounds people. Childs was always, we think, out running around outside with animals. He was a nature-loving little boy, and I think had a close relationship with George. They would capture things and sort of share a kind of love of nature together. So I think she's talking about him. And then the other George that she mentions is George McGrew, who was Frick's nephew, cousin, right, relative, and also worked as Frick's private secretary. And he was going to help Brownie, the dog, write a letter to Child. I think was in there. So those are the Georges that we had. Joellen, one of our Clayton docents, is saying thank you and how nice it is to meet Julie virtually. Pamela has a question. Is it just the photographs of the letters or are they surrounded in black? If so, why? Thank you for that, because that's an important point that Dawn or Julie can address.
Dawn, do you want to take this one?
So the black bordered correspondence indicates that Mrs. Frick is in mourning when she writes these letters. So during the Gilded Age in the late 19th century, there is a very strict code of etiquette that guides all social behavior, particularly for the upper class, which the Fricks are part of. So if she's writing this in 1893, she is still in mourning. As Amanda mentioned in the beginning of the program, she had lost a child in 1891 and then an infant in 1892. So she stayed in mourning for quite some time, and a lot of the correspondence from the 1890s is etched in black, just like this.
And it would have been their stationery for writing letters, but also their calling cards, anything like that for social interaction would have been marked with this kind of this decoration around the outside.
Any other questions? Kelly, did I miss any? I don't think that I did. This is not the last you will all hear and see of these letters. We use them, we will continue to use them, and we also want to plan we're working on lots of virtual programming for the upcoming future. We have a lot of things planned. But again, this is wonderful. Like, I'm sort of loving the fact that we can do this and bring Julie into our world, for a little while.
We just got a question from Joan.
Oh yeah.
Do the archives contain any letters from Mr. Frick?
Absolutely. Letters from Mr. Frick to Childs? Is that the question, or?
Not specified, but.
Okay, well, I'll presume. Yeah, there are letters from Mr. Frick to Childs, and it's, it seems like Mr. Frick had very high expectations of Childs academically, and he's kind of known for correcting Childs in his letters, and not always in the most kind way, but I'm sure it comes from a loving place. And he would compare Childs' schoolwork to other boys' schoolwork, and there was just kind of a general, they convey a general sense of expectation about Childs and his academic performance. So those are letters from Frick to Childs during this period, but of course they have a lifelong correspondence as father and son. Those letters are scattered throughout the archives, whether in Childs Frick's papers or in Mr. Frick's portion of the collection. And there are materials that we received later from the family where Mr. Frick shows up as well. So yes, there is a wealth of material between Mr. Frick and Childs that we could perhaps explore in another program at another time.
Thank you, Matt. That could be a follow-up. Good question. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I mentioned at the beginning that we have a little mini focus on letter writing this week. As Dawn was saying, we are all, separated from everybody we care about. And so we were thinking about this idea of writing notes and how special getting something in the mail from somebody you love can be. So on Monday, we posted a really wonderful kids activity. It's up on our website and social media. I think if you want to work with a child in your life to write a letter to someone that he or she loves and misses, we have that out. And our blog post this week is going to be written by Lisa Viscusi, our manager of adult learning, and she's writing about famous letter writing relationships in history. So that's something you can look forward to coming out, through the Frick Pittsburgh in our email later this week. And the Frick Art Reference Library site, our website, there's lots of resources, all kinds of things on there. Please visit both of those things. You can reach out to any of us with questions. And just thank you again to Julie and to Dawn. I loved having both of you on screen together. This has been so much personal fun for all of us too, I think. And thank you all for joining us. We will continue to plan programs and see you here again very soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Kelly. Bye.